My name is John David Martin, and I'm a police officer. No, that's not entirely correct. I'm more than a cop. I'm an investigator with the Tyler County Crime Task Force in Texas. My title is Special Agent. I am good at my job and rarely fail to complete the tasks assigned to me. I know that sounds selfish, and in some ways it is, but I'm also just stating facts. I was doing one thing. It was a hot case. The rape of two young girls and the kidnapping of one of them. This became news and will be in people's memories and minds for many years to come. Everyone who knows me calls me JD, including my beautiful wife, Eliso. We have been married for 5 years and have no children. I think our marriage is pretty normal, and most of the time I would call it special. Ellie is actually very pretty and sweet. We grew up together and were always good friends, and it just blossomed into love and eventually engagement and then marriage. She was always the best thing that ever happened to me, and a lot of good things happened to me. Bill Jacobs, my boss, was the director of our task force, and many years ago, he took a liking to me and my work. Because of this, I had every opportunity for advancement, and I did not miss any of them. I'm 32 years old and second in command on the task force. I know it had a lot to do with Bill's support, but I also earned it by doing a great job. A year ago, Bill called me into his office and told me that there had been a double rape and that one of the girls was in the hospital and the other had been kidnapped. The girls were sisters, Mary and Janice Schindler. Mary was 16 years old and Janice was 17. According to Mary, their uncle Josh Schindler picked them up from school and took them to his lair. She said he and his friend Garvey Smithson raped them repeatedly. Mary was in pretty bad shape emotionally and physically, and the two men decided to take her to the hospital and leave with Janice. Both men had always been a little unstable, but they had never done anything like this before. Bill knew he shouldn't have asked me to take on this case, but he did. He told me that he thought if anyone could find Janice and arrest Josh and Harvey, it would be me. I, like everyone else, was sick of the facts, and I agreed to take on this case. I took Gina Darling, one of our employees who works with me most of the time, and went to the hospital to meet Mary. Gina does a fantastic job, and I trust her with my life. I knew she would be invaluable in talking to Mary. Mary's condition had stabilized, and she was ready to testify with all the details she could remember. Mostly Gina, carefully walked her through the whole ordeal, gathering as much information as possible without upsetting the young girl any more than she already was. She was incredibly brave and was able to tell us everything. When we finished, I told Mary that we would do everything we could to find Janice and bring her uncle and his friend to justice. I never make promises because you never know what you can do, but I wanted to make a promise to this girl. I think she knew I would give it my all. Gina and I worked tirelessly on this case. We worked 18 hours a day for 3 days in a row. In short, I was obsessed with the case, and so was Gina. I believe this is where the cracks in my relationship with Ellie began. She complained to me that I was working too much. She complained that I was spending too much time with Gina. I looked at her while she was tearing me apart and couldn't believe it was my sweet wife. I told her there was a scared and abused 17-year-old girl who was counting on me to find her before they killed her, and I'd be damned if I was going to relax until I found her. I guess I pretty much told Ellie to suck it up and stop being so selfish. Well, on the 4th day, we had a break. Someone spotted Harvey in Creighton, a small town on the border of our county. He went into a grocery store to buy some supplies and was seen by someone who recognized him. There were several photographs of Josh and Harvey in the newspapers, but not everyone had seen them yet. We're lucky this guy saw the news. Several SUVs containing officers converged on Creighton, but when we got there, Garvey was nowhere to be seen. Presumably, he had just left the city and headed south. I knew this part of the county quite well and developed a plan for how we could systematically check all possible shelters in the area. We started by setting up a perimeter 10 miles from Creighton. We then began to spread out to cover the area. Once again, we were lucky. Just 3 hours after Harvey was spotted, we found a shack in the desert. And sure enough, Janice was there. She was brutalized and beaten, but was alive. We were able to call a medical helicopter, and she was flown to a hospital in Tyler. Unfortunately, Josh and Harvey somehow slipped past us and were nowhere to be seen. I knew they would be hard to find, but I was determined that they would not get away with this, and I promised myself that I would find them and see them punished for what they did to these two girls. We returned to Tyler and Gina, and I went to the hospital to check on both girls. Janice had surgery for vaginal and anal tears and was recovering. Gina and I just sat and talked about this case, and I made it clear to her that I would find these two bastards, even if it was the last thing I ever did. I could tell that Gina was also very excited about the whole thing, so I gave her a little hug and smiled to calm her down. I told her that we will catch these people and bring them to justice. When we had a chance to go inside and talk to Janice, she told us that her Uncle Josh and Garvey had decided to leave her there and were going to go to the hard places, as they put it. She thought she heard them say something about South Texas, but she wasn't sure. Apart from the details of the rape and abduction, she could not have been more helpful in locating the two men. We were overjoyed that both girls were safe and that they would recover soon. I knew they would need extensive counseling and ongoing support from their friends and family, but I was confident that they would be okay. On the last day of that week, I promised them that I would find their uncle and his friend and bring them here. I know, I shouldn't have promised them, but I was confident that I would succeed. I think that's where the story really begins. I was still obsessed with finding these two men. I don't apologize for this, but it's true. I spent most of my time working on this case. I followed leads that others thought were cold. I wanted justice, and I didn't want to break my promise to Mary and Janice. Needless to say, the situation got worse at home. Ellie kept telling me that it was stupid of me to work so hard on this case. Both girls were found and both got better. I kept telling her that bringing Josh and Garvey to justice would help in the ultimate healing of these two teenagers, and she kept telling me that I should leave it at that. I worked on this case for 5 weeks, and our relationship became more and more strained every day. Then we caught our latest break in this case. It was Tuesday morning when I was informed that the bastards had been arrested in Lake Charles, Los Angeles on a DUI charge the night before, and the arresting officer was the cousin of the police chief in Beaumont, Texas. I've been in contact with the Beaumont police chief, Manny Grayson, numerous times over the last 5 weeks because I've been following up on leads down south. He let me know that they were in custody in Lake Charles and would be held for the maximum number of days to give us time to consider extradition. In 2 days, all the extradition paperwork for the two men from Louisiana to Texas was processed, and I made arrangements to pick them up on Friday. Me and Gina were going to go to Lake Charles and bring the prisoners back to Texas. I figured the trip would take me about 5 hours each way, so I planned to leave around 4 a.m. so we could pick up Josh and Garvey by 10 a.m. and be back in Tyler before 5 p.m. When I got up in the morning and was ready to leave, I leaned over Ellie and kissed her forehead. I said, "Goodbye, dear. When I get home tonight, this will all be over, and I will make it up to you for all the time I wasted on this matter." Her response was less enthusiastic than I expected when she said, "Well, don't rush back because of me, JD. I'm sure I'll find something to do until you get back. I've been on my own for the past 6 weeks, so this won't be anything new. It was just as bitchy as she had been with me this whole time. Now I knew I wasn't paying enough attention to her, but I thought she knew how much I loved her and that it was just a temporary thing. I thought she would be overjoyed, but all I heard was sarcasm. I knew I would have to do a lot to make it up to her, and I was more than willing to do it. I missed her too, but this case was very important for those girls, for our city, and for me. I would make it up to her. When I left the house, I was in full gear. I had everything I needed to bring these idiots back to justice with the death penalty. I arranged for Gina to come with me, as I knew this was something special for her too. So I stopped at the police station and picked her up, as we had agreed in advance. We drove in silence for about 2 hours, both thinking about our own thoughts about the events of the past day. I looked at her a couple of times and she was deep in thought, so I didn't say anything. Suddenly the silence was broken by the ringing of our phone. Gina took it and listened for a minute, then handed it to me saying, This is the boss. This is JD, I said. What happened, Chief? JD, slow down so we can talk, he replied. I found a place to pull off the road, and Bill told me that Louisiana had lifted its extradition order. Apparently, an enterprising assistant district attorney had thought to do a DNA comparison between Josh and Garvey and had obtained information about an unsolved rape and murder 8 months earlier. Since they had a murder along with a rape, it was decided that Louisiana would prosecute first, and therefore we would not be able to take them with us to Texas. Although Gina and I were not happy that we did not get justice in our own jurisdiction, we both understood that their case had the greatest potential for the death penalty. In Texas, because there was no murder, we could probably only give them life sentences. We reluctantly agreed to leave the current charge to Louisiana. We didn't really have a choice. They had these bastards, but we didn't. However, I spoke with Manny on the phone to be sure that he would inform the Louisiana court system that the two should be held without bail, as they were clearly flight risks and were facing additional criminal charges in Texas. He assured me that he would contact his cousin and that they would not be released. When all the talking was over, we turned around and headed back to Tyler. Bill told us to take some time off since there were no pressing investigations going on now that Josh and Harvey were in custody. On the way back, we stopped for breakfast and I dropped Gina off at her house around 11 a.m. and headed home. When I returned home and opened the garage door, someone else's car was parked in my space. I know there's always an unfamiliar car parked outside the poor guy's house, but it was true. It was a bright red Mustang, and I thought I knew whose it was. It was one Billy Marconi, the local badass. I, of course, had a very bad feeling in the pit of my stomach, and even before I entered the house, I felt the rage building within me. I knew what I would find, and I knew I wouldn't like it. I quietly entered through the garage into the utility room, and from there I walked through the kitchen, the hallway, and up the stairs to the bedroom. There were no clues around, as you might expect, no shoes or piles of clothes. But as I walked up the stairs, I heard them in the master bedroom. Oh God, Billy, you satisfy me so well. Each time seems to be better than the last, Ellie moaned. Do you like my hot man tool, Ellie? It's better than your asshole husband, isn't it? Answered Billy. Oh God, yes, Billy. You know how to make me feel like a complete slut, and I love it. JD loves me, and he would never make me feel like a slut, but I love it when you use me. Just fuck me, she said intermittently. As I walked down the hall to the bedroom, I could feel the blood pounding in my head, and I knew I was pretty much out of my mind. I reached for my gun and was about to pull it out of the holster when my hand caught the taser that every officer carries when transporting prisoners. It was probably good that my hand touched it, because there is no telling what I would have done with the gun. When I looked into the room, I saw Ellie's ass and Billy had it from behind. I quietly entered the room with a stun gun in my hand, was able to stand right behind him and hit him right in the ass and genitals. He fell like a stone onto Ellie's back, and when she threw him off of her, I hit her too. Once they were both passed out, I took out one set of handcuffs and handcuffed Ellie to our bed. There was no way she could get away from me or stop me from doing what I was about to do to Billy. I then handcuffed Billy and dragged him by his feet from the bedroom down the hallway to the basement door. I think he hit his head a couple of times rolling down the stairs, but I really didn't care. I handcuffed him, wrapped his arms around one of the support beams, blindfolded him, and gagged him. By this time, he was starting to come around again, and I let him. You completely lost your mind when you decided to have sex with a policeman's wife. I'll be back to take care of you a little later, Billy. Don't go anywhere. I told him with an evil laugh before I hit him with the taser again. I returned to the bedroom and sat on the chair next to the bed. Ellie was crying quietly, and my heart hurt. But at that moment, my anger at what I had discovered was stronger than my compassion. I took out a stun gun and placed it on the bed in full view of her. Allison, I said, I have a few questions for you, and you better answer them honestly. If you don't answer honestly, I will use the stun gun on you over and over again until I find out the truth. I'll know it's true if you and Billy give me the same answers. So here are the questions I asked her. How long have you and Billy been having sex? How many times have you been together? Where did you meet to have sex? Does anyone else know that you had sex with Billy? Do you like sex with him more than with me? These were her answers. Today is the only time I had sex with Billy. Just this time. Only here this one time. Nobody else knows. And no JD sex with him was better than with you. Only I already heard her say, each time seems to be better than the last time. And, oh God, yes, Billy, you know how to make me feel like a complete slut, and I love it. JD loves me, and he would never make me feel like a slut. But I love it when you use me. Just fuck me. So I knew she was lying to me, and I told her so. Allison, these answers are not true. I warned you what lying to me would lead to. I raised the stun gun and gave her a full charge again. When she came to her senses, I told her, I'm going to talk to Billy, so while I'm gone, you better think about the right answers. I'll be back. I took my stun gun with me and headed to the basement. I knew almost exactly what would happen when I asked Billy the same questions. I knew he would lie, and I knew I would hit him a couple of times. Believe me, I hoped this would be the case. I growled at him. You piece of shit. I'll give you 10 seconds to tell me the truth. Next time I ask questions, or I'll fry your brains with this thing and feed your dead and smoking body to the fucking coyotes in the desert. I hit him full force several times. His whole body went limp, but twitched a little. Then he came to his senses, and I asked, 10 seconds, Billy. Remember that. When did it start? I started counting 10, 9, 8, 7. When I got to 5, he blurted out, about 6 weeks ago. How many times did you and Ellie have sex? At least once a week each of those 6 weeks, and sometimes it was twice a week, so maybe 8 or 9 times. Where did you do this? Always here, in your bed. When you were going to leave for a while, she called and I came. Does anyone else know that you had sex with my wife? No, I kept it with me. Some of my boyfriends know that I am dating a woman, but no one knows who or where I am going to meet her. Billy, is there anything else you'd like to add? Is it true this time? No, Guy, this is the whole truth. You know, I regret doing it, but you know she hit on me and everything, and you know how it is, man. Guys just aren't strong enough to say no. Big mistake, that stupid bastard should have kept his mouth shut. I told him, I'll be back later to finish up with you, Billy. Don't go anywhere. And I gave him another long taser, just because he made me angry. I went back upstairs to Ellie and said, well, Billy seems to have told the truth. He doesn't seem to like the stun gun very much, so he came clean about it. Are you ready to be honest with me now? Answer the questions, Allison. She couldn't look at me, but she began. The first time was about 6 weeks ago. We were together once or twice a week for every week, so that's maybe 8 or 9 times. He always came here and always in this bed. Nobody knows JD anymore. And I really enjoyed the sex because it was so dirty. But I love you and the way you make love to me. JD, I'm so sorry. Allison, I know you're sorry now. But what I don't know is whether you regret doing it or being caught. And I can never know for sure. And I can't live like that. I'm going to go take care of Billy and then come back to let you go. I picked up all of Billy's clothes from the bedroom floor, where he had thrown them in his haste to get my wife to bed. Damn, it made me angry again as I walked out of the room with her. His cell phone fell to the floor. I noticed it was a BlackBerry and I got an idea. I threw Billy's clothes on our kitchen table and walked out into the garage. With Billy's car keys in hand, I got into his car and backed out into the driveway, closing the garage door behind me. I drove north out of town until I reached Interstate 20 and headed east to Longview, about a half hour away. I stopped at Walmart on the south side of Longview and bought 2 burner phones. I then went to 2 other Walmart stores in Longview and bought 2 more phones from each, so I had a total of 6. From there, I went to Radio Shack to meet my old friend. I sat down and explained my idea to him, and after a gentle warning about what I was about to do, he helped me get the rest of the equipment I would need. When I got home, I copied all of Billy's contacts, all of his text messages, and all of his voicemails to one of my new phones. Then, using available hardware and apps, I cloned his phone, Yes, I know it's illegal, but at the time I didn't care. I wanted to keep an eye on this bastard, and I was going to do it. Once that was done, I went down to the basement and had a heart-to-heart talk with Billy. I told him, "Billy, you're nothing but a jerk, and one of these days I'll find a reason to humiliate you. I know you're angry, and I know you wish you never saw me, but unfortunately, you did. That's what I expect. You will never say a word about this to a single living soul. You don't know Allison, and nothing has ever happened to you here in this house. You will never see or speak to Allison again. I will be watching, and any contact with her will result in your immediate demise. Do you understand me, you sack of shit?" He nodded his head affirmatively, but this did not satisfy me. I said, "Are you sure you understand me, you sack of shit?" This time he said weakly, "Yes, I understand you." I freed him from the handcuffs and told him, "Then get dressed and get out of my house and never, and I mean never, show your face here again." After he left, I reluctantly went up to my bedroom and released Allison. The bed was a mess, but I really didn't care. I told her, "I'm sorry you had to ruin everything here, but it can't be helped. I'll let you clean up after yourself." Then I threw a few things into the gym bag and told her, "I'm going to go away for a while to think things over. I'll be back to let you know what's about to happen." She tried to grab my hand to stop me and begged, "Please, JD, don't leave me. Please stay." "I am so sorry." I said, "Yes, I'm sorry too, but I have to go now, but I'll be back." I checked into the Staybridge Suites near the city center and spent most of Friday and Saturday evening thinking about what I'd like to do in the future. On Sunday morning, when I turned my cell phone back on, there were about 20 messages, most from Ellie. I didn't really want to listen to any of them, so I just skimmed through the ones Ellie wrote and listened to the rest. There was one from my boss, a couple from Ellie's sister, and one from Ellie's dad. I immediately called my boss to let him know I was okay and asked for a few days off. He didn't mind me taking a few days, but he told me to stay in touch. I realized I hadn't eaten since Friday night and realized that wasn't such a good idea. I went down to the hotel restaurant and ate a decent breakfast. I spent the rest of the day fishing at Tyler State Park. I caught a few nice bass on a jig and a worm, but didn't keep any of them. It's better to let them grow and let someone else have the fun of catching them. By lunchtime, I was tired and hot, so I headed back to Staybridge, showered, and then went out for dinner. Having decided to myself what I wanted to do, I went to bed and slept very well indeed. It was Monday, and I had spent the entire morning and most of the afternoon getting a few things done before returning home. It was around 7 p.m. when I walked into the house for the first time since I left on Friday night. Ellie was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. On the way home, I stopped to grab a couple of sandwiches and some chips, so I placed them on the table in front of us. She looked at them and then at me and said, "I'm really not hungry, JD." "I know you've probably lost your appetite," I said, "but you should really try to eat a little. After you eat, we'll talk." She reluctantly took the sandwich and took a bite. I think that first bite whetted her appetite, so she ate greedily until she had eaten the entire sandwich and all the chips. When she finished, she looked at me and smiled, but then burst into tears. "Oh, JD, I'm so sorry," she said, and she began to sob uncontrollably. When she finally calmed down, she went through the entire scam checklist. 1. It didn't mean anything to me, it was just sex. 2. I love you and never intended to hurt you. 3. I was going to end it. 4. Part of the blame lies with you because you were so obsessed and I was lonely, and so on and so on. When she finished, I asked, "Are you finished yet? I know who, when, and why, so nothing else matters to me. None of your statements mean shit to me. It was sex, but with someone other than me, so you shouldn't have done it. If you love me and didn't mean to hurt me, you shouldn't have done it. And yes, of course you were going to end it, maybe someday. And finally, if you were lonely, why didn't you spend time with your father and sister? No, you needed to find that bastard so you wouldn't feel alone. And it was my fault? My effort and obsession, as you put it, was to apprehend the kidnappers and rapists, and it turns out they were also murderers. I would say that my efforts were not an obsession, but dedication to duty and public safety." I continued, "Allison, I have no idea who you are anymore. The woman I married would never do what you did. She would never allow herself to be treated the way Billy treated you, and she would never think so badly of me that she would betray me the way you did. I have no idea where the woman I married is now, but I'm sure she's gone forever. I'm sure I'll never be able to get her back. It's too late for that. I'm also afraid that the man you married no longer exists either. I used to believe that if you did the right things in life, everything would be fine. I've lived my whole life by this principle, and look where it got me. I don't believe it anymore. I don't think it matters what we do anymore. So the man you married is gone, too. Ellie kept crying while I told her all this. I know it was hard for her to hear, but at the same time, it was true. It all came to me over the weekend as I struggled to figure out who I would be now. Oh, I knew, but I wasn't going to tell anyone about it. So, Allison, I said, I'm leaving. I put the folder with papers on the table. These are divorce papers. Let me tell you what's in them. First of all, you have something that I want back. My great-grandmother's engagement ring that I gave you, I want it back. This is part of my family history, and I want to keep it in my family. I'm sorry to ask because I really thought we could pass it on to a daughter or son someday, but that won't happen to you anymore, so I want it back. Oh, God. Her sobs doubled in intensity, but I continued. Please give me the ring now. She looked at me pleadingly, but I just shook my head, and she reluctantly took it off her finger and handed it to me. Secondly, Allison, I continued, you know that I receive money from my family foundation. Some of it is in our accounts with our investments and savings, and I don't want you to have any of it. I will continue to receive money from my trust so that I have everything I need. More sobbing. Crap. I intend to keep 100% of my pension, I added. Since your IRA account has almost the same amount, I see no reason to share my pension in any way. Finally, I said, home. As you know, the house does not belong to us. This is also part of my family trust and will continue to be so. This trust was created long before you and I were married and will be considered premarital property. You have no legal right to the house or to any family trust. But that's why I'm giving you most of our money and investments. They are approximately equal in cost to a house. Besides, you, of course, must leave this house within a week from today. I give you a week to find another place to live and remove all your things. Again, there are household items that were part of the family trust that I expect you to keep when you leave. You can guess what will happen if you don't do this. Of course, her sobs started again. So, Allison, I sighed, that's all. This is my proposal. This is in no way negotiable. Have your lawyer look at the papers. Sign them or don't sign them. I really don't care. Anyway, I'm leaving. In any case, I will no longer be your husband. Our marriage is over, either legally sealed or practically, but it is over. If you sign the papers, give them to my lawyer, and he will complete the process. Of course, by this time, she was inconsolable. There's one more thing we need to do before I go, I said. We're going for a ride. We walked out to my patrol car, and I told Allison to sit in the back seat. She didn't know it, but I wanted her there so she couldn't get out. By this time, it was around 9 p.m., and the city's nightlife was starting to bustle as usual. We entered the more crime-ridden part of town, and I pulled over to the side of the road near one of the hottest spots for rent. There were several women standing around, and I walked over and talked to them for a minute. Allison was still sitting in the back seat of the car, not understanding what was happening. I took one of the women by the hand and led her to the car. "Get in the back seat, Brenda," I said. She climbed inside and sat next to Allison. As I drove away, I saw both women in the back seat looking at each other appreciatively. After we left this part of town, I pulled into a shopping center parking lot and started talking. "Allison," I said, "this is Brenda. I'm going to ask her some questions, and I want you to just listen to what she has to say. Brenda, what is your real name?" "Damn it, JD, you know who I am." "I know, but I want you to just answer all my questions, Brenda." "Okay, I really am Judy Parker." "Are you married?" She took a deep breath and said, "No more." "You were married?" "Yes, after Ron Parker." "Who is Ron Parker?" "He's an assistant district attorney in the city." And why aren't you married to Ron Parker anymore? He divorced me because I cheated on him. And Brenda, who are you now? Damn you, JD, you know who I am. I'm a prostitute. Are you happy now, asshole? No, Judy, I'm not happy, and I know you're not happy either. But why don't you tell Allison now how you became a slut? Don't overlook anything. By this time, Allison's eyes were bulging and her mouth was open. Well, Judy began, it all started when I met Billy Marconi at a social event. He was handsome and so charming, and he really enjoyed being around me. My husband was so engrossed in chatting with the big shots at the party that he seemed to just ignore me, and Billy stepped in to make me feel good. We drank a few drinks together, and before I knew it, we were already on the patio, and he was already caressing my ass and breasts. He whispered things in my ear that I had never heard from a man before, how he would make me feel if he could be alone with me. I was vulnerable, and he took full advantage of it, but of course I didn't know that at the time. Before we went back inside, we agreed to have lunch the next day at the Carlton Hotel restaurant. Of course you know what happened. We ended up in one of the rooms, and Billy fucked me. I liked it. He was so attentive and so wonderful. This began a long journey to where I am now. He started coming to our house when Ron was away on business. Sometimes he would have sex with me all day, and I would have so many climaxes that I could barely see clearly, much less think clearly. Then he started bringing in some weed, then eventually some cocaine, and I got hooked. One day, Ron caught us and threw me out. Billy took me in, and the long road to my demise suddenly became shorter. Before I knew what had happened to me, I was hooked on drugs, and Billy was selling me to anyone and everyone. Then he found someone new to work with and just sent me to his stable of girls. So that's where I am today. I saw Allison just shaking in the back seat. She was shocked. I asked Brenda, "How many girls does Billy have in the stable, Brenda?" She answered, "I know of 4 other girls who are performing tricks for him now. From time to time, one of them goes to the hospital or to the cemetery, and a new one appears." "Last question, Brenda," I said. "What would you do with Billy Marconi if he were in the back seat with you right now?" "I would gouge his eyes out with my nails, cut off his genitals, and shove them down his fucking throat. I made a terrible mistake when I got involved with him, and he ruined my life. Most days I just wish I was dead." "Well, Brenda," I continued, "one day you might get a chance to do it with Billy Marconi. This time he messed with the wrong guy." She smiled at me and said, "JD, if you ever give me this chance, you will have free sex with me for life." Allison cringed and gave her a rather angry look. This is too damn bad, Allison, I thought, but I doubted I would ever accept Brenda's offer. I gave Brenda a couple $100 and asked if I could take her home instead of driving back to her place of work. She thought it might be a good idea, so we went to her house. After we dropped Brenda off, I drove Ellie back to the house. We sat in the patrol car for a few minutes before I let her out and made my closing speech. "Allison," I still refused to call her Allie ever again. "So now you see what a slippery slope you started on. You can see how you came so close to flushing your life down the drain. You can see where your actions led. I did this last kind thing for you because I love the woman I married and because I don't want her to become another Brenda. We're done, but you don't have to be another Brenda. Take control of your life and be who you are meant to be. Build yourself a good life." She started to say something, but I silenced her. "Allison, I have nothing more to tell you. It's too late to say anything. From now on, your future is completely in your own hands. Goodbye. Now get out of the car." I opened the door to let her out, got back into the car, and drove away. My new life was about to begin, but that would have to wait. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.